Compared to other cities, what we have here is amazing. For example, I don't think anywhere in the world you can land in one of the busiest airports, like Changi Airport here in Singapore, and you can take a taxi 30 minutes down the road. You can enter a primary rainforest, which is at Botanic Gardens.
Hi, my name is Shabir and this is the Library Report, a series where we talk to interesting people, explore exciting spaces and unearth compelling stories. In this episode, I'm taking a ride on the wild side, or wildlife to be exact, to find out more about our nation's neighbourly relationship with fauna. Stay tuned to the end of the episode for a chance to win something special. Singapore is a bustling urban scape, and it is easy to forget that the city is not just home to humans but wildlife too. Today I'm joined by an animal advocate, an associate professor and a librarian to explore how Singapore has become a haven for everyone and every critter, big and small. Hi everybody, welcome to the show.
Hi, I am Anbu. I'm the co-CEO at Acres here in Singapore. Together with my advocacy team members, we carry out programs such as humane education and outreach and work towards policy and legislative reforms for better animal protection.
Hi, I'm Philip Johns. I study urban wildlife at Yale NUS College.
I'm Preeta, a librarian at the National Library Board. I curate programs and services for adults pertaining to environmental topics and sustainability. I also curate digital content on sustainability.
So when it comes to wildlife, Singapore is not what comes to mind to most, but I understand that our island is a home to a rich diversity of species. So I want to know, to kick things off, what does wildlife in Singapore look like to you?
I think when we do education programs, when we talk to members of public, many people are aware of the commonly cited urban wildlife such as the mynas, pigeons, some of the insects and even the koals who wake most of us up early in the mornings.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so, but what we may not always be aware of is other animals such as we have from monitor lizards to pangolins to some of the very rare biodiversity here in Singapore. And it's amazing when we raise awareness about these, people are really amazed and impressed with the biodiversity we have.
Just the amount of biodiversity is really impressive to me. I'll take my students on walks and sometimes we'll see 20, 30 species of birds. A lot of times we see things that are just kind of phenomenal to me. So there are times when I've seen, for example, galugos, and people will tell me that they're bats or they're flying squirrels, and they're not. And I understand the confusion, but at the same time there's something that's really special that's in Singapore.
What is unique about Singapore's wildlife compared to other cities?
I think a lot of things make it unique. One is just the juxtaposition of an extremely dense human population and as much biodiversity as we have. And then there are other things on top of that facilitate the wildlife. In a lot of cities you'll have one or a few parks, or the parks will be off to the side. New York has Central Park, Philadelphia has the park along the river, but here we have lots of little parks that are interspersed with the city as well as the central catchment. And that allows a lot of connectivity among different areas for wildlife to exist.
Compared to other cities, what we have here is amazing. For example, I don't think anywhere in the world you can land in one of the busiest airports, like Changi Airport here in Singapore, and you can take a taxi 30 minutes down the road. You can enter a primary rainforest, which is at Botanic Gardens, and from there another taxi ride, you can enter a casino. And at the other end, in the west and north of Singapore, you can watch crocodiles in the wild here in Singapore. So that comes as a beautiful package, very unique, and that also places a unique responsibility on every one of us to ensure that we protect what we have.
I think it's the fact that we don't know that there's so much diverse wildlife. But then, you get speakers like Anbu and like Philips to come down to our libraries and then give talks. So we have this series called Down to Earth, so where we get experts like them to share more about our wildlife and like environmental topics.
Are our green practices positively influencing coexistence between wildlife and humans?
Some of them definitely are. So one of the things that Singapore did in the 80s was that they made a really active effort to clean up the waterways, and that had a lot of downstream effects. There are a lot more fish, there are a lot more fish in the reservoirs, and I think everybody likes that. The water is much cleaner on average, but on top of that, that allowed some animals to come back and to flourish, including otters. So that's one that actively promoted biodiversity. Another thing is that Singapore has planted a lot of trees, over 1 million trees, maybe 1.4 million trees, and just having that kind of tree coverage has allowed habitat for birds and other wildlife that live in trees.
And also when we evolved from, green city, garden city to a city in nature, these park connectors have played a very important role to allow wildlife to move around as well. One good example is the common palm civets, who are native to Singapore, and they used to be originally found along the east coast where there were coconut trees, and this was before the reclamation. They are slowly establishing and adapting to these estates because they are suitable for them.
What are some of the challenges when it comes to coexistence?
So there is a lot of awareness that we need to raise for us to learn about our native wildlife. I think one of the main challenges that we face is a response from public when they encounter wildlife, which is actually fear. So it comes from lack of awareness. So fear leads to panic, and they may do something that will hurt the animal or themselves even. So we do need a lot of education and awareness. But after COVID, we actually observed that many people were interested and they were appreciating nature. They were going to the parks and nature reserves. However, that appreciation kind of stops when the animal is sighted within their premises. So there is actually a boundary drawn for the tolerance and appreciation, and that is the gap that we need to address through promoting coexistence, more education.
I think another challenge is that people expect wildlife to follow our human rules. I think, like, for example, like we expect like animals to be like friendly with each other, and like, it's all like rainbows and sunshines, but I think in reality that's not the case, and I think that is something that we need to work on. Yeah.
At the same time, you've got this situation where people are interested in animals because of some kind of outside source. Like, they might be photographers, they might be watching Disney, they might be doing something like that, and that promotes that interest. That makes them more interested, more aware of what's going on, and I think it kind of encourages people to see what else is out there.
One of the key areas of focus for Green Plan 2030 is city in nature, and that means living harmoniously with wildlife. What are the steps that could be taken, and what are the steps that have already been taken to tackle the challenges of coexistence?
I think one of the first steps is to really get people to understand what coexistence means, and whether as a community we are open to sharing our spaces with wild animals. One of the things that we do is to work with all our stakeholders, organizations, wildlife working groups to work towards better legislative protection for wild animals. So one example is actually feeding of all wildlife in Singapore is prohibited. This is put in place to ensure that there's no behavioral changes in the wild animals because they see humans as a food source, and that can result in potential human-wildlife conflict situations. So there are these measures in place, and in addition we also have a 24-hour wildlife rescue hotline run by Acres. There's also a 24-hour line that is operated by NParks. So there is these avenues for people to call and get help immediately if they are not sure. And we really try to approach also at the grassroots level by working together with individuals, where we try to raise awareness, explain to them that it's not just about keeping the distance and appreciating, but also there are specific do's and don'ts, and you can basically learn and empower yourself so you can have an encounter that is safe for both the animal and you.
So we have digital resources, but we also have really fun programs that targets individuals across all age groups. So not only just adults, but like children. So be it via storytelling or like a workshop, I think we see the importance for individuals across all ages to learn more.
So what else is being done to change public perceptions and attitudes towards wildlife?
One of the things that we found that as a foundation we need to address is really the public perception. And our goal is to be a very fair one, which is that we want people to perceive different kinds of animals in the same way. from public towards the animals. So we are trying to make sure that we raise awareness that biodiversity comes as a package. There are animals that we may like, we are comfortable with, but there are also animals that we may not be comfortable with.
I think one thing about Singapore that makes it a little bit different than a lot of places is that partly because it's a relatively small place, people become familiar with individuals in wildlife. You know, people know their mynas, people know their macaque, people know their otters, things like that. And I think that again, that breeds that familiarity, which can be really, really beneficial because you're not just thinking about, you know, these nameless, faceless pieces of wildlife, you're thinking about a neighbor, something that you interact with regularly.
And I believe that we as Singaporeans, if we take this initiative to understand wildlife better, this coexistence that we're talking about will be a lot more meaningful, and we'll feel more empowered, rather than just reaching out to the authorities.
So I think we are coming to that level where we need to learn what to do, what not to do, and there is a stronger role that every one of us can play. However, that can actually take some time, and if someone sees a python in a canal swimming around and they take a photo and walk away and not call someone to come and remove, that would be successful coexistence.
And there are lots of benefits, especially benefits to nature, but there are also benefits to us personally. Having biodiversity, going out, taking walks in nature, observing these things all have health benefits. And I think that's part of the reason why Singapore is trying to make sure people are no more than around 10 minutes away from different parks. But you can think about this more broadly too, that if we take advantage of this, if we kind of empower ourselves to look at nature, that's going to be something where it helps us, and ideally it raises awareness and it helps nature as well.
I think coexistence to me has like two components. I think one is like appreciation. I think also like knowledge. Like I think these two go hand in hand. I think having knowledge, we can appreciate wildlife even more and like understand their behaviors and their benefits. I think not just to nature but to us also. And I think that's really important for us to have and appreciate. Yeah.
So when I talk about this whole thing, I realize that if we can appreciate and understand nature and wildlife better, we become more empathetic. That's my personal hope and aspiration. So what is your hope for Singapore's future as a city in nature?
For me personally, not only as a librarian but like as an individual, I hope people stay curious and want to know more about wildlife. And I think, like Anbu said, the onus is on us, and our environment will look very different in 10 years. We need to constantly learn how to coexist with them and appreciate wildlife. Yeah.
So for me, my kind of ideal vision of the future would be that what we see here is sustainable, and we've seen this in a few cases, and might even be something that we can grow. And that takes a combination of things, including people's attitudes toward wildlife, including different policies, including how we go about our day-to-day lives. But I really want to think that what we've got here is not something that's slowly eroding away, but something that's going to stay and might even grow.
I think city in nature is a very beautiful aspiration, and all of us actually have a role to play to realize the dream and vision. However, these changes can actually take some time. And it does not take a lot from us to be kind to each other, to also the living animals in our environment. So it is very possible, and with all these efforts that's happening, we hope that we'll be there one day soon.
Thank you, Preeta, Philip, and Anbu for the insightful discussion.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And that's all we have for this episode of the Library Report. Before you go, if you want a chance to win a $30 gift voucher, all you need to do is leave a comment telling us what do you appreciate about our wildlife in Singapore. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for alerts on our next video. See you soon.